When my sister and I were born, the court astrologer declared that twin princesses were an ill omen. As a result, my sister was sent to the frontier to be raised by my uncle. The frontier was harsh and cold, and she couldn't endure the relentless martial arts training day and night. When she tried to escape, she was captured by enemy troops and reduced to a lowly slave. Meanwhile, I was pampered and spoiled by my father, the emperor, and was even betrothed to the kingdom of Jiang. Marrying there would make me a noble empress. My sister, filled with hatred, hid herself in the wedding procession and poisoned me. But unexpectedly, we were reborn. This time, she was the first to draw the longer stick, which meant she could stay. Now it's your turn to taste the hardships of the frontier. But she didn't know that the seemingly glamorous imperial palace was the true hell. The two princesses. Your fate from here on out is in your own hands. Everyone in the grand hall stared at the two bamboo sticks in the grand sage's hands. One long, one short, they would decide who among my sister and me could stay in the palace and who would have to go to the unbearably harsh frontier with our uncle. Fong Changning impatiently pushed me aside. I'll pick first. As soon as she spoke, she snatched the right one, as she had expected. It was the longer one. Fong Changning clutched the bamboo stick tightly, as if it were a lifeline, and let out a deep breath. Our mother was just a lowly concubine. She had no say in this majestic hall. She was always timid, but even she couldn't help but pull at Fong Changning's sleeve. Why are you being so disrespectful today? In her eyes, Fong Changning had always been sensible and obedient. She couldn't understand why she was acting so impulsively today. She didn't see the smug look in Fong Changning's eyes as she looked at me. She also didn't know that we were both reincarnated. We were twins. But the state master had said that twin princesses were an omen of misfortune, and that after turning 12, they would bring misfortune to the great Zhou kingdom. Unless, of course, only one of the twins remained. After all, we were imperial descendants. The emperor and the court officials discussed it for several days and came up with a plan. They would send one of the princesses to the frontier to be raised as a boy, thereby deceiving the heavens. Fong Changning had always been good at putting on a show. In her previous life, she had done everything to stay, showing filial piety to her father and mother every day. In the end, she even demonstrated her sisterly generosity by letting me choose first, never expecting that I would choose to stay. She reluctantly went with her uncle to the frontier, but she never imagined how harsh life there would be. There were no elegant clothes or delicious food. She endured the wind and sun every day, and her uncle was extremely strict, forcing her to practice horse stances and learn swords and spears daily. Finally, Fong Changning couldn't take it anymore. She stole all her uncle's money and fled in the night. But she overestimated her ability to navigate. She ended up in the wrong direction and stumbled into the enemy camp, where the enemy soldiers immediately captured her. To save her life, Fong Changning had no choice but to reveal her identity and betray her uncle by revealing his border defense strategies. The enemy used her as a bargaining chip in negotiations with her uncle while treating her like a plaything, subjecting her to relentless abuse. Fong Changning clung to life. Finally finding an opportunity to escape, she dared not return to the great Zhou dynasty, fleeing in exile, and somehow ended up infiltrating my wedding procession. By then, I had already gained fame throughout the great Zhou dynasty. Even a 3-year-old child knew that Princess Jinghua was of unparalleled beauty, skilled in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting, and deeply beloved by the emperor of the great Zhou dynasty. The first of the 5 nations, the kingdom of Jiang, sought to marry her, and I would become the most honored empress if I married there. Compared to Fong Changning, we were worlds apart. No one remembered the other princess suffering in the remote frontier. Fong Changning went mad. We shared the same blood, and she was more favored by the emperor than I was. Why did she end up like this? While I have everything? Fong Changning poisoned me with a heart full of hatred. So in this new life, she didn't care about rules or propriety, she would do anything to stay. As she wished. It was me who was ultimately chosen to go to the frontier with my uncle. My uncle had been at war for years, his body radiating a fierce aura that made people dare not approach him. This time, he had rushed back on horseback to fetch me. When everything was settled and we stepped out of the palace gates, he glanced at me with a hint of reluctance, as if he wanted to touch my head, but hesitated because of the rough calluses on his hands. "Jinghua, you've been through a lot." I smiled and pulled his hand. "It's been 5 years since Uncle returned to the capital for his report. Hurry up and tell me what's interesting in the Northwest." The date for my departure to the frontier has been set. My mother was worried about leaving me behind, so she sewed clothes for me with her own hands and held me close every night. Even my busy father found time each day to talk with me, and I could sense his reluctance to let me go. Fong Changning saw all this but said nothing. My mother comforted her. "Changning, your younger sister is about to leave the palace. We can't help but worry about her. So we've neglected you these past few days." Fong Changning once again adopted her usual magnanimous and gentle demeanor. "I understand. I'm also very reluctant to part with my younger sister." Only I knew she wasn't truly magnanimous, she simply didn't care anymore. This time, she would be the Princess Changning who enjoyed all the luxuries and honors. And she would marry that young and promising emperor of the Jiang Kingdom. As for me, she can't wait to see my downfall. She is certain that the harsh frontier will turn me into someone as unfortunate as she was in her previous life. But she doesn't know that this seemingly glamorous palace is the true hell. In the future, when the world is in chaos, military power will be the ultimate authority. The Northwest Desert is indeed a harsh place. After only 3 days, my delicate skin began to crack. My uncle told me to stay in the tent and even wanted to find someone to bring me charcoal. But I refused. "Uncle, this is the Northwest. We don't pamper princesses here. Since I've come here, please don't treat me like a princess anymore." My uncle looked at me deeply and said, "You must understand that even if you're not a princess, an ordinary woman wouldn't survive here." I nodded in agreement. "Therefore, I beg you to teach me martial arts and allow me to study military strategy and tactics under your guidance. From today onward, I am just an ordinary soldier here." My uncle was taken aback, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. He hadn't expected me to say what he had been planning to say. "All right," he exclaimed joyfully. "As long as you wish to learn, I will teach you everything I know." My uncle was the commander of the Northwest region, known for his strict military discipline. From the next day onward, he required me to rise at dawn each day to train with the soldiers, learn basic gunmanship in the afternoon, and study the military strategies he had annotated in the evenings. At first, I couldn't even hold a proper horse stance for long. The other soldiers were ordered not to show me any leniency, so some of them deliberately targeted me during training, picking on me and beating me until I was covered in bruises. I knew my uncle wanted me to understand that in the Northwest, strength and skill were the only things that mattered. So I trained relentlessly. Since I started from a low point, I had to put in more time than others. After 3 years, my body grew stronger, and my gunplay became increasingly fierce. During another sparring session, the boy who had always beaten me into the ground was now the one begging for mercy. The teenager named Xingyu had his arm twisted behind his back, clenching his teeth in pain. Yet he still smiled. The general was right. You're harsh on yourself, but even harsher on others. I let him go, not bothering to respond. Get up quickly and go with the general on patrol. My uncle took us to see the northwest border. He said that it was the middle of winter. The river was frozen, and the Qiangrong army was busy surviving and wouldn't come over. But I suddenly remembered that around this time in my previous life, the court had received battle reports. A severe cold snap hit the northwest, and the river froze over with thick ice. The enemy army took advantage of the night to cross the river on the ice, and the northwest was ambushed, suffering heavy casualties. Uncle! They have no food or warm clothes, they must be planning to raid us. If the river is frozen over with thick ice, will they try to cross at night and ambush us? My uncle's expression changed. Go check the thickness of the ice. As I said, the ice was thick enough for horses to walk on without issue. My uncle urgently deployed troops, and to our surprise, we ambushed the enemy forces that night. It was my first time on the battlefield, and I fought with great vigor. The battle ended in a decisive victory. The emperor was overjoyed. It was nearing the end of the year, so he summoned my uncle back to the capital to receive his rewards. In my previous life, Feng Changning returned to the capital for the first time after leaving it around this time as well. I was curious whether she had lived the life of luxury she desired in the palace this time. From the day I left the capital, the palace announced to the world that Princess Jinghua had suddenly fallen ill and died. From then on, there was no longer a Princess Jinghua in this world. That's why I returned this time, disguised as a man, accompanying my uncle as his adopted son and a junior officer. The emperor summoned us with a joyful expression, bestowed rewards for our merits, and then kept me behind alone. Jinghua, have you suffered these past years? He reached out to take my hand but suddenly noticed that my hands were rougher than those of the palace maids who swept the floors. And he paused for a moment. I bowed in the manner of a subject, though I cannot fulfill my filial duty before my father. I have guarded the border for him. It is not hardship. The emperor was overjoyed. Excellent! Reward her. The emperor bestowed a golden whip and specially permitted me to stay in the palace for a few days. I had intended to visit my mother, but as I approached the imperial garden, I encountered Feng Changning. Over the years, I had changed, and so had she. She was now dressed in luxurious palace robes, holding a warm water bottle, and adorned with jewels and pearls. Looking at me, I seemed more like a refugee. We were once twins, but now we didn't even resemble each other. Feng Changning covered her mouth and laughed. Sister, you must have suffered a lot over the years. Look at your face, you're not even as pretty as Xiao Tao. Xiao Tao, her trusted maid, laughed along with her upon hearing this. I remained unmoved. Sister, you're overthinking it. I'm doing just fine. The environment in the northwest is harsh, but I can ride horses freely, make many friends, and learn sword and spear techniques. There, I can take control of my own destiny. This was the truth. But Feng Changning didn't believe her. In her eyes, I must be putting on a brave face. She was about to say more when a group of people rushed over, accompanied by the sharp shouts of a woman. Useless. If my kite is lost, I'll take your lives. It was the arrogant eldest sister, the only daughter of the empress, Zhao Yang. I was dressed modestly, so she didn't notice me at first. But she saw Feng Changning. It's you. She looked down at her with disdain. Feng Changning bowed respectfully. Greetings, Your Royal Highness. Zhao Yang's eyes flickered, and she slyly instructed her attendants, don't bother looking for my kite. Let my sister go instead. Changning, aren't you the best at pleasing me? Feng Changning's face turned pale instantly. She bit her lip tightly, feeling embarrassed. To be honest, I wasn't surprised. In her previous life, Zhao Yang was the most formidable person in the palace. Relying on her status as the empress's daughter, she bullied all her younger siblings. Feng Changning dared not resist and could only grit her teeth and climb the tree to pick the kite. Unfortunately, the winter tree trunk was too slippery, and she lost her balance, falling into the lotus pond, looking utterly disheveled. Ha 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 ha. You're killing me. Little sister. You really know how to make me happy. Zhao Yang laughed. and the servants followed suit. At that moment, I was the only one not laughing. Zhao Yang's gaze fell on me, and she finally recognized me. "You're back." The dead sixth sister Jinghua? Outside the palace, it was announced that I was dead, but some people inside the palace still knew the truth. Zhao Yang circled around me, looking me up and down with disdain. "You're a princess. After all, look at yourself. What are you wearing? You haven't bathed in days. Have you?" She belittled me, and Fong Changning felt inexplicably pleased. She watched me with schadenfreude, hoping I would be bullied too. That was exactly what Zhao Yang intended. She pointed at the kite that hadn't been taken down and said, "Your sister didn't take it down, so you go get it." The tree wasn't tall, and taking down a kite was no trouble at all for me. "But why should I? Are you sure?" Zhao Yang impatiently said. "How dare you disobey my orders?" I nodded and pulled out the golden whip my father had given me. With a swift flick, the kite was shredded to pieces. The kite's frame landed right at Zhao Yang's feet. "I got it for you." She was furious. "You worthless woman. Bring someone. Take her whip." The eunuchs rushed forward. I didn't resist, letting them take my whip and burn it. Fong Changning looked at me in disbelief. I glanced at her. "Is this the life you want?" Even though she was soaking wet and in a mess, she forced herself to deny it. "Except for this, I'm doing just fine." "Humph. Fong Jinghua, you wouldn't dare defy Zhao Yang either, would you?" "Who said that?" When they were almost done burning it and were about to come to punish me, I suddenly slapped my forehead as if I had just remembered. I forgot to mention earlier. This whip was just bestowed upon me by the emperor. He said that seeing the whip in the palace is like seeing him. Zhao Yang, who was about to shove the whip's remains into my mouth. "What should we do now?" I looked at her and smiled slightly. "You burned our father." The incident of Zhao Yang burning the imperial golden whip reached the emperor's ears. Of course, it was my doing. I have no idea how I offended my imperial sister, but she burned my whip without a word. I knelt before my father, speaking one sentence after another. It must be because I've been away from the capital for so long, living in constant fear in the northwest, that I forgot the palace rules and offended my older sister. My uncle often taught me that the sacrifice of flesh tactic often yields unexpected results. Zhao Yang pointed at me, about to explain, but I bowed my head again. If it were an ordinary whip, burning it would be fine. But this was a gift from my father. I miss my father day and night and wanted to bring the whip to the northwest so I could look at it when I missed him. Hearts are made of flesh. My father already feels guilty toward me. By saying this, his guilt has doubled. Zhao Yang's face turned red with anger. "Why didn't you say that earlier?" At her question, tears welled up in my eyes. My sister already said it. But no matter who gave the whip, didn't the imperial sister also say to burn it? Zhao Yang was about to say something else but suddenly snapped back to her senses. "I'm saying she's disrespecting the emperor's grace and committing insubordination." She knelt down with a thud and shouted in defense. "Your Majesty, please see clearly. This vile woman is slandering. You keep calling her a slut. She's your sister." The emperor was furious. "Do you think this isn't enough of a scandal?" Then he looked at me with a complicated expression, helped me up, and sighed. "I truly owe you so much." Though he seemed to be on my side, Zhao Yang wasn't worried. Before leaving, she even threatened me menacingly, "We'll see about this." But she didn't expect the punishment to be so severe. Not only was she confined to her quarters and had her salary reduced, but the emperor also ordered the palace matrons to personally oversee her upbringing, forcing her to stand for 3 hours each day. Even the empress was implicated, publicly scolded by the emperor for failing to raise her daughter properly. Only after everything was over did I finally have time to visit my mother. As soon as she saw me, She burst into tears, pulling me close and chattering on endlessly. Finally, she hesitated and said, "Jinghua, please help your mother persuade your sister." Only then did I learn that Feng Changning had remained in the palace, not only skipping school every day but also repeatedly driving away her teachers of music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. She often dressed as a man to mingle with the young nobles on the streets. It was said that many of them were infatuated with her. What a disgrace! My mother was truly at a loss. Which is why she told me all this. She couldn't understand why Princess Feng Changning, as a princess, would do such things that lowered her status. But I knew. Because in my previous life, the rumors about me were, Princess Jinghua was of unparalleled beauty. Whenever she appeared, noble young men would follow on horseback just to catch a glimpse of her. Feng Changning wanted to compete with me in everything. So she also wanted those men's affection. I just can't understand it. Is the love of those men worth so much? Even now, when I think back to their gazes, I feel sick. Feng Changning lost face in front of me, so she turned to others to fill her vanity with their flattery and admiration. When she was dressed as a man, riding horses with those reckless youths on the street, I had just come out of my uncle's mansion. I saw her riding clumsily, while the men cheered her on. Changning is truly unlike ordinary women. She has made us look at her with new eyes. Feng Changning, flattered by the praise, grew even more arrogant. She charged straight toward a child standing motionless in the middle of the road, intending to leap over his head. Damn it! I didn't bother with my female attire. Quickly pulled out my veil to cover my face, and kicked Feng Changning away with all my strength. Then I grabbed the reins tightly and forced the horse to turn in the opposite direction. How dare you? Do you know who you kicked? Feng Changning, come to the palace to find me. I coldly left those words behind, ignoring Feng Changning's venomous glare, and rode the horse toward the palace gates. Feng Changning was furious. What was even more infuriating was that after I left, those men snapped out of their daze and asked her, was that also a girl from the palace? She was so graceful and heroic. Feng Changning froze in shock. A chill ran down her spine, bringing an unprecedented sense of danger. I had only been back for a few days, and my father had already scolded Zhao Yang, who had always been favored. Now, I hadn't even shown my face, and these aristocratic young men were already drawn to me. If this continues, will my father keep me here and send her away? Recalling the hardships she endured in her previous life, Feng Changning trembled with fear. She hadn't yet gained fame throughout the capital, nor had she waited for the Emperor of Jiangwa to propose marriage, becoming the most revered empress in the world. How could she feel at ease? To ensure she could return to the frontier sooner, Feng Changning took a desperate risk and employed a scheme. The national preceptor had stated during the emperor's ascension that military generals were a threat to the nation. So now the great Zhou dynasty prioritized literature over martial arts. When Feng Changning paid her respects to her father, she casually mentioned that she had visited her uncle a few days earlier, and her uncle seemed dissatisfied with the provisions the emperor had allocated to the army. That day, the emperor immediately ordered her uncle to return to the border, fearing he might form alliances with court officials. That night, he secretly summoned me and ordered me to keep a close eye on my uncle after returning to the border and report immediately if he showed any signs of disloyalty. I nodded in silence. As I left the study, my blood rushed to my head. I burst into Feng Changning's room, dragged her inside, and shoved her into a lotus-filled tub filled with water. Ah! 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 Feng Jinghua, you've lost your mind. I see you've lost your mind. Let me snap you back to reality. When the nest is destroyed, how can the egg survive? My uncle is my own flesh and blood. Yet Feng Changning has once again pushed him toward certain death. Yes, that's exactly what she did in the previous life. After 3 years back in the capital, to stay, She deliberately told the emperor that her uncle had treasonous intentions. The emperor grew wary of the border general, deliberately withholding silver and grain, leading the great Zhou to suffer defeat after defeat. Later, she fled and was captured by the Qiangrong army. To save her life, she betrayed intelligence, causing tens of thousands of soldiers to die on the border. Fang Changning struggled to push me away, laughing madly. "You're furious, Fang Jinghua. I knew you wanted to stay and replace me. Let me tell you, the only one who can stay is me." Foolish. Looking at her smug expression, I found it laughable. She couldn't endure the hardships of the borderlands, and now she doesn't even want to endure the hardships of the palace. But she doesn't know that all the glory I had in my previous life was something I earned with my own blood and sweat. In my previous life, Zhao Yang was also arrogant, but I never suffered any bullying, because she dared not. I woke up earlier than everyone else every day and went to bed later than everyone else. I was the top student in all my subjects, and I excelled in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. One year, a neighboring country paid a visit and posed a challenge in public, a half-composed melody that had been passed down for centuries in their country, with no one able to complete it. They challenged our princes and princesses to finish the second half. Everyone was stumped, and the envoys from the neighboring country grew even more arrogant, mocking our kingdom as a mere pretender to the arts. My father was furious, and everyone else gave up. But I stayed up for 2 days and 2 nights. And before the envoys left, I played a piece that amazed everyone. My father was overjoyed and grew even more fond of me, showering me with endless rewards. Did others envy me? Of course. But did they dare to confront me? Of course not. It was because my father valued me that I became his prized possession to showcase to others. Whenever there were foreign visitors or grand state banquets, I was always given a seat of honor. At that time, I was the face of the great Zhou dynasty. I was ruthless toward myself, which is why I became a one-of-a-kind princess. This irreplaceability also became the foundation for my mother and me to survive safely in the palace. This life is no different. Zhao Yang has always been favored by the emperor. If I were just a princess, the rivalry between sisters wouldn't cause much trouble. But this time, I returned as a deputy general to receive my reward. Behind me stand the soldiers who have been defending the northwest frontier. If I were to be mistreated in the capital, the news would reach them and break their hearts. No matter who I am, I must have my own value. Unfortunately, Fang Changning has never understood this. She only knows that in the previous life, I stayed in the palace, admired by the aristocratic youths, and deeply loved by the emperor. She believes these two things are causally linked. Just like now, she whispers in my ear with solemn certainty, "Let me tell you a secret, one day, I will marry the emperor of Jiangkingdom and become the most honored empress in the world. As for you, you can just wait to die in that harsh, freezing land." I curve my lips slightly. It seems she heard many stories about my love with the emperor of Jiangkingdom in her previous life. Like how I saved him from assassins on the Qixi festival. And the emperor of the Jiang Kingdom fell in love with me at first sight, vowing to marry no one else. Unfortunately, all of that is a lie. In truth, I could have reminded Fang Changning to return to the right path. But why should I? We have both lived 2 lifetimes, each following our own path. That is fair. Moreover, Fang Changning envies and hates me, and I feel the same toward her. In my previous life, I worked hard to reach the highest position a woman could attain. I intended to use my abilities to persuade my father, the emperor, to abandon my arranged marriage, so I could enter the imperial court as a woman and set a precedent for all women. But because of Fang Changning, the border regions were defeated, and the Qiangrong army advanced southward. To save himself, my father sought aid from the Jiang Kingdom, whose conditions were that our kingdom submit as a vassal state, send 1,000,000 taels of gold, and marry me off to their prince. All the skills I had spent my entire life mastering would come to an end, and I would never see the light of day again. Feng Changning did not just cut off my path, she cut off the path of all women in the world. Even in this new life, she remains the same. Why should I save her? On the way back to the northwest, I passed through the border between Zhou and Jiang. The people along the way said that the Emperor of Jiang was about to tour the 4 kingdoms, with Zhou as his first stop. They also said that this trip was to select a queen. This news would soon reach Zhou, and Feng Changning would undoubtedly make a major move. I relayed everything my father had told me to my uncle. He remained silent for a long time. The emperor actually suspects me to this extent. After all these years of defending the border, all he gets is the emperor's suspicion. How could he not be heartbroken? I sat on my horse, my expression calm. Since they all say we are disloyal, why not make it official? My uncle was startled and looked around warily. Be cautious in the capital. He was surprised that I could utter such treasonous words. But I had made up my mind the day I was reborn. I want troops. I want power. After finally escaping the confines of the palace, I will do everything in my power to rise to the top. Uncle, don't be afraid. We are surrounded by our men, and the northwest is our territory. Since the emperor is trying to suppress us through silver, grain, and supplies, we will use the military supply routes for trade and use the profits to buy grain. Of course, the most urgent task now is to drive those Qiangrong tribes back to their homeland. I faced the rising sun, my eyes burning with determination. My uncle looked at me for a long time before finally bursting into laughter. I will follow our lord. The campaign to drive out the Qiangrong lasted the entire spring. We drove them from the border cities to the Yellow River, and from the Yellow River back to the grasslands. Before early summer, they launched a desperate counterattack. At that moment, I stood on the cliff and ordered the soldiers to scatter poisoned willow fluff below. With the help of the east wind, we killed every one of them without losing a single soldier. But the battle report sent back read. The Qiangrong troops are putting up a desperate resistance, and our army is still driving them back. We need time to build up our forces. Just then, an informant from my uncle in the capital brought news. The Emperor of Jiangwu intends to select a princess from the Zhou dynasty to marry as his queen, and the chosen one is Feng Changning. According to her status, the first choice should have been Zhao Yang. However, on the day before the state banquet, Zhao Yang accidentally fell into a pond. Her face was slashed by thin ice, and she was disfigured. It was said that the only person with her at the time was Feng Changning. Feng Changning is truly ruthless. She would rather make an enemy of the empress and endanger her mother's life to secure her own future. But she doesn't realize that placing her hopes in a man is the most foolish choice one can make. I have no time to concern myself with her now. I am busy raising funds and provisions to feed the troops. Another summer passed, and my mother sent a letter to the northwest through an intermediary, pleading with me and my uncle to find a way to save Feng Changning. She was willing to die rather than marry into the Jiang Kingdom. As I read the letter, I couldn't help but raise my eyebrows. Oh, she finally realized something was wrong. The Jiang Kingdom was the strongest of the 5 kingdoms, with a powerful army. When the emperor wanted to marry a queen, shouldn't other countries be competing to send their daughters? Why would the emperor personally come to choose? Because their emperor was ill. Mentally ill. He had a brutal temperament and took pleasure in torturing people, even having a taste for human flesh. In his 7 years on the throne, he had married 5 queens, none of whom survived past a month. Later, no ministers in the country were willing to send their daughters to the palace. Someone must have come up with the idea to tell the Jiang emperor that women of royal blood were the most delicate and charming. So the Jiang emperor personally traveled to other countries to select the most appealing queen. This news was sealed by the Jiang Kingdom, But it wasn't exactly a well-kept secret. Feng Changning probably wanted to learn more about her future husband to win his favor. But she never expected to uncover this terrifying truth. Now she refuses to marry him under any circumstances. However, the Empress says that for the sake of diplomatic relations between the two countries, she must die in the Jiang Kingdom, even if it means her own death. Zhao Yang was disfigured by Feng Changning, and the Empress hates her to the core, eager to see her meet her end. My mother begged me to save her. But how can I save her? This path was not one she chose herself. I wanted to watch coldly, but I underestimated Feng Changning's depravity. Seeing no way out, she bit the bullet and poisoned the Chancellor's son at the farewell banquet in the palace. The Chancellor's son was already a lecher by nature and couldn't resist the temptation, so he rolled around with her. That day, the disgusting scene was witnessed by everyone. The emperor was so enraged that he ordered the execution of all the palace attendants who had seen it. Feng Changning knelt on the ground, crying out her innocence, claiming that the Chancellor's son had taken advantage of her while she was drunk. But she had already lost her virtue. If she were to marry into the Jiang Kingdom in this state, the Jiang Emperor would surely be enraged and declare war on the Great Zhou Kingdom. At that point, the Jiang Kingdom and the Qiangrong would join forces to attack, and the Great Zhou dynasty would be in grave danger. With things having come to this, there was only one last option. That was for me, who looked exactly like Feng Changning, to take her place in the marriage. The emperor didn't even hesitate, drafting a secret edict ordering me to return to the capital immediately to prepare for the wedding. Relieved of their immediate crisis, they were overjoyed, completely unaware that my marriage would also be a death sentence. But they didn't know that the Qiangrong crisis had already been resolved, and I was no longer at their mercy. My uncle, upon hearing the news, was so enraged he kicked over the table. They don't care about your life and are sending you to marry in their place. Jinghua, we won't wait any longer. Let's gather our troops and return immediately. I'll see who dares to make you marry. I laughed heartily. Marry? Of course I will. My uncle was completely baffled. I looked at the map of the Great Zhou dynasty and smiled. Uncle, now that we have troops, do you know what else we need? My uncle paused, then realized. It's the hearts of the people. That's right. My marriage for the sake of the country is a noble cause. With Feng Changning as a contrast, I have won the hearts of both the court officials and the common people. Moreover, I'm not going back to die. After discussing it with my uncle all night, we set off the next day with elite troops on fast horses back to the capital. The emperor was so enraged by Feng Changning that he suffered a heart attack and his condition fluctuated between good and bad. Upon hearing my plan with my uncle, he was so frightened that he coughed incessantly. You want the army to disguise themselves as a wedding procession, enter the territory of the Jiang Kingdom, and then attack their imperial city? He exclaimed in shock. No. If we fail, our Great Zhou dynasty will be in grave danger. The state master, cowardly and timid, hurried to stop him. This is absolutely out of the question. Last night, I observed the celestial omens. As long as the princess marries into the Jiang Kingdom, our Great Zhou dynasty will enjoy decades of peace and prosperity. Why resort to war? I coldly looked at him. As long as the Jiang Kingdom exists, the Great Zhou dynasty will never know true peace. Your Majesty, please reconsider. The national preceptor continued to protest. I have calculated the fate of the Zhou dynasty. If we launch this war, before he could finish, I slashed his throat with my sword. Blood sprayed across my face, but I wiped it off without flinching. What a nuisance. 5 years ago, he used some flimsy calculations to decide my fate, and now he's trying to send me to my death with the same nonsense. But I do not believe in heaven, I only believe in myself. Those who stand in my way shall die first. The emperor had never witnessed such a bloody scene and was too terrified to speak. I bowed respectfully before him. Please issue an edict at once, Your Majesty. The wedding procession must be grand and magnificent. His face turned pale. I shall consider it. But I smiled sweetly. Father, you misunderstand. This is not a request. The news of my imminent marriage to the Jiang Kingdom will soon spread. It is said that the wedding procession will stretch for thousands of miles, with countless palace attendants accompanying me. Everyone will say that Princess Changning is deeply loved by the emperor. As for the real Changning, she did such a thing and was hated by the empress. The emperor sparing her life is already a mercy. We could only discuss an alliance with the chancellor's mansion. But the chancellor's mansion refused. After all, Changning no longer holds the title of princess and can never appear in public for the rest of her life. The chancellor's mansion does not need a wife confined to the inner chambers. They only agreed to take her as a concubine. Even so, Fong Changning felt she had one. On the day she left the palace, I was trying on my wedding attire in the palace, adorned with jewels and looking quite prosperous. Fong Changning deliberately took a detour to see me. She examined me from head to toe, her gaze as cold as if she were looking at a corpse. My dear sister, cherish the time you have now. Everything you have now is what I have bestowed upon you. Though I am in a pitiful state, at least I am still alive. I looked at her without a flicker of emotion. My foolish sister, we're fighting for the throne. And you're still amusing yourself? Never mind. Ignorance can sometimes be a blessing. Before my wedding, my uncle spent a fortune hiring over 100 storytellers to spread tales in tea houses and taverns about how the great Zhou dynasty was besieged on all sides. And how Princess Changning, disregarding the danger, volunteered to marry into the enemy camp to save the nation. For a time, everyone praised her. On the day I left the city in my red wedding gown, the people knelt in 2 rows. They shouted in unison, Princess, you are noble. Farewell, Princess. May you have eternal blessings. I departed amidst their blessings. The palace attendants accompanying me were elite troops from the northwest, and among the thousands of boxes of dowry were hidden weapons and armor. Meanwhile, my uncle led tens of thousands of troops at the Zhejiang border, waiting to coordinate with me from within. I smiled, head held high. This did not feel like a wedding procession, but rather the path to my coronation. It had been agreed that the Jiang Kingdom would send royal relatives to receive the bride, but I never expected their emperor to come personally. Perhaps he was confident in his military strength and the fact that he was on his own territory, so he did not bring many troops. Let me see how beautiful my empress is. He led me off the horse, and when our palms touched, I sensed something was amiss. How can a princess have such rough hands? But it was too late. I flipped my palm, and the blade was already across his neck. They're not rough. How else could I hold the knife? At my command, the wedding procession instantly transformed into elite force. While in the distance, the sound of hooves grew louder, as if thousands of soldiers were rushing toward us. Even with my life in his hands, Emperor Jiang didn't panic much. He laughed. You do have some courage. But with your tiny Zhou kingdom, you dare to challenge the foundations of my Jiang kingdom? What if the 3 kingdoms unite? Emperor Jiang's expression changed drastically. The Jiang kingdom had been tyrannical for years, and the other kingdoms had long harbored grievances. But they hadn't reached the point of no return. Until now, when he set his sights on the princesses of the other kingdoms. This time it was me who was chosen. Who would be next? My uncle's confidant, Xing Yu, took my seal to the states of Chen and Yang to explain the pros and cons. These 2 states had few heirs to the throne, and their princesses were treated like precious treasures. Xing Yu used my name to persuade them to send troops. Now the 3 states were besieging the Jiang state, and it was in dire straits. I traded my elaborate wedding gown for cold armor and, for the first time, led the vanguard to capture the first border city of the Jiang Kingdom. The second followed. Then the third. In 5 months, we advanced deep into their territory. The vast Jiang Kingdom was nearly divided among the invaders. I had planned to claim more territory for myself. But suddenly news arrived from the capital that my father, the emperor, was gravely ill. The empress had him imprisoned to force him to abdicate in favor of her son. What? I fought so hard on the battlefield. And you're taking credit for my achievements? This won't do. I immediately led my troops back and dealt with those incompetent soldiers. When my father saw me, he was nearly in tears. Jinghua, you're back. I held his hand, and we acted out a scene of deep father-daughter affection. Father, please do not worry. Your health is most important. My body is failing. Jinghua, I cannot rest easy about the future of the great Zhou dynasty. What do you think of your eldest brother? I pretended to ponder. The eldest brother is ignorant and unfit to govern the country. The emperor paused. What about the second son? He is stubborn and unruly. Unfit for such a great responsibility. What about the fifth son? He's still too young. Before my father could speak again, I smiled and cut him off. Your Majesty is in good health. Why rush to name an heir so soon? There's no need to hurry. Your daughter has returned, you should rest easy. My father was not at ease. Because he had gone from being confined by the empress to being confined by me. In reality, there was little difference. I left matters outside the palace to my uncle and only participated in decision-making. For a time, the palace became surprisingly quiet. Every year on the Mid-Autumn Festival, the palace would host a grand banquet to entertain the court officials. But this year, with the emperor gravely ill and the empress confined by me, the inner court was unsure whether to proceed and came to seek my instructions. Hold it! Not only should it be held, but it should be held with great fanfare. Now that the Jiang Kingdom has been defeated, this is a cause for celebration. Upon receiving my orders, the inner court immediately began preparations. I was worried my mother would be bored in the palace, so I asked her to help oversee the preparations. But to my surprise, she was so anxious she couldn't eat or sleep. Jinghua, your father's chambers are guarded day and night. Did you order that? I pretended not to hear and served her some food. Try this. It's a specialty from the Northwest. I made it myself. She gripped my hand. You have saved the emperor. The emperor will surely find you a good home in the future. You won't have to go back to that freezing Northwest. Jinghua, what else could you possibly want? Mother, you've never understood me. I lowered my eyes to look at her hand, rubbing the thick calluses on my own palm. You look at my hands and think no girl would want them to be like this. You think this is suffering, but I see it as an honor. You think finding a good home is a reward. But to me, it's no different from breaking my limbs and imprisoning me until I die. What I want is for no one to dare speak against me. For no one to control my destiny. I want true freedom. Her mother looked at her in shock. Since ancient times, has there ever been a woman who didn't depend on a man? Therefore, the old rules must change. I slowly wiped my hands, speaking in a calm tone, as if I were chatting with her about everyday matters when I was a child. If I were in a position of authority, I would surely hold a high office in the imperial court. Regardless of gender, I simply spoke my mind. Her mother was so frightened that she dropped the bowls and chopsticks. Jinghua, don't make a mistake. I called someone to clean up the broken pieces and took my mother up to the city wall. Since she entered the palace, she had been confined to a small courtyard day and night and had never stood so high before. I wanted to tell her that most women have shallow visions, seeing only their husbands and children. But our vision can be far-reaching, extending to the nation and the world. Mother, the winners are never wrong. My mother finally clenched my hand and stood by my side. She said, I have only one request, spare your sister. If Feng Changning behaves herself from now on, I'll treat her like air. But the problem is, with her temperament, how could she ever give up? It wasn't until she married into the chancellor's mansion that Feng Changning finally realized how terribly wrong she had been. She had entered the mansion through underhanded means. After losing her princess status, she couldn't even enter the palace gates. Without her maternal family to rely on, others looked down on her. Feng Changning knew that all she could do now was cling tightly to her husband. At least she still had her beauty, seducing a fool wouldn't be a problem. At least she'd have something to rely on for the rest of her life. But how could Zhao Yang, disfigured as she was, let it go? She gathered a group of beautiful maidservants and sent them all to the chancellor's mansion. Those maidservants had been trained and knew far more tricks than Feng Changning. Before long, she was discarded. She had been locked in a small courtyard within the chancellor's mansion for months, with no one bringing her any news. She probably didn't even know I had returned alive. Now that the chancellor has seen the situation clearly, he wants to curry favor with me. He is an old minister who knows of my relationship with Changning. He thought I still cared about our sisterly bond, so he brought Feng Changning to the Mid-Autumn Palace banquet. Even now, Feng Changning still believes that the emperor has remembered her and wants to save her from her suffering. She was determined to go before the emperor to show her filial piety. But she never expected to encounter me outside the emperor's chambers. She had grown so thin, with dark circles under her eyes, and she looked at me as if I were a ghost. Feng Jinghua. You're not dead? What happened? Weren't you married off to the Jiang Kingdom? I just smiled at her. You're surprised to see me alive? You must have escaped back here on your own. She stared at me nervously, muttering, I'll tell my father emperor to send you back. How could you come back alive? How could you? I wasn't unable to come back alive, I just couldn't live better than her. 2 lifetimes living in my shadow. Feng Changning began to show signs of madness. She was about to have someone announce her presence when Zhao Yang saw her from inside. Feng Changning froze like a mouse seeing a cat, too scared to lift her head. Zhao Yang's face still bore faint scars. She glanced at her with disgust, then bowed respectfully to me and said, Sister, the emperor has taken his medicine today and is in a stable condition. Good. She was at least sensible enough to know who the true master of the palace was now. Witnessing this scene, Feng Changning froze in place, her face turning deathly pale. A few days later, when my mother came to find me, I had a bad feeling. Sure enough, she excitedly said that Feng Changning knew she had done many wrong things in her first half of life and had now repented. She wanted to get along well with me in the future. She wanted to have a meal with me, perhaps with a hint of hope, or perhaps just to see what she was up to. I agreed. That evening, my mother cooked a feast, preparing all our favorite dishes from when we were children. Feng Changning seemed to have suddenly returned to normal. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Sister, I now hope to spend the rest of my life with Mother. Please forgive me for the mistakes I made in the past. I looked at her quietly and nodded gently. Feng Changning immediately brightened up. She took my hand and said, Do you remember when we used to bathe together when we were little? Those were such happy times. You must be tired today. Let me wash you. I kept looking at her. Feng Changning shifted her gaze nervously. My silly sister. Before scheming, at least hide the malice in your eyes. I didn't expose her and did as she wished. Bathing with her. She used the excuse of wiping my back to examine every inch of my skin. Where there were scars. Where there were moles. She remembered every detail. In the end, she said she would enter the Buddhist hall to pray for the emperor and empress for the next month and would come to see me again at the beginning of next month. My mother was overjoyed. As I looked at my mother's face, my heart grew colder than the ice of a harsh winter in the northwest. After that, I went to see my father again. His illness was already severe, but I used the excuse that his body was too weak to withstand strong medicine and refused to let the imperial physician administer any. Thus, we kept delaying, and now he lies in bed, emaciated and barely able to speak. I sat down beside him and spoke in a calm tone. Father, the edict of succession, are you still unwilling to write it for me? He turned his eyes toward me, his facial muscles twitching slightly, as if he were cursing me for treason. But father, if you do not pass it on to me, to whom else can you pass it? Those good-for-nothings? You've governed the country weakly, unable to protect even your own daughter. Those incompetents you've raised are useless. What use are they? I placed my hand on his, feeling him tremble slightly. Father, you don't have much time left. After a long pause, he managed to utter a single word. All right. Father, have you come to your senses? The edict you desire. I shall give it to you. Father, that's the right decision. The weather has been nice lately. I'll take you to Putua Temple tomorrow. With the Buddha's protection, your illness will surely recover. Putua Temple is the temple where Fong Changning prayed for blessings. Knowing I was going, she couldn't wait to see me. I thought she must have already found a way to forge an identical scar. Once she kills me, she can take my place. I sent someone to tell her that I was waiting for her in the meditation room. I also placed my father in the room, covered him with a quilt, and pretended not to see the knife in his hand until I left. When Fong Changning found out that I was fast asleep, she stabbed the knife into the quilt without hesitation. Looking deranged. It's all mine. Everything you have will be mine. But my father, who had been feigning weakness, struggled to rise and thrust the knife into her chest, shouting, "Go to hell with me! The throne of the great Zhou dynasty will never fall into the hands of a woman." At that moment, I stood outside the door, listening to the commotion inside, unmoved. My uncle stood beside me, guarding the door. Am I too cruel? My uncle sighed. You gave them a chance. Jinghua. As an emperor, you weren't ruthless enough. But I have nothing left. I lost my name. I lost my family. The people closest to me were plotting against me. When my mother heard the news of Fong Changning's death, she was overcome with grief, convinced that I had killed her because I couldn't bear her. She wasn't wrong. She said she never wanted to see me again, so she shaved her head and became a nun. But mother, I was prepared for this. From the moment I was reborn, I knew that the path to the throne is paved with blood. I don't need family ties, and I can't afford any weaknesses. This loneliness of ruling over an endless empire, I can endure it. In the winter of the 25th year of the Qingyuan era, Empress Fong Changning ascended the throne and changed the national name to Lu. The annals record that from the empress's ascension, the kingdom of Joy prospered and expanded its territories, becoming the leading nation among the four kingdoms, with no one daring to challenge it. The empress valued both literary and martial arts, established the imperial examinations, and held military exams. Women could also take the exams, and becoming a marquis or chancellor was possible. For a time, talents from all over the world flocked to the Kingdom of Joy. A great blessing.